Depression and trauma can leave people feeling trapped, like the fog will never lift.
I was wrestling with depression and anxiety, some trauma that happened to me in my home.
After suffering strokes, Susan struggled with balance.
I had a very difficult time processing. I really needed help. After I had the strokes, I would drag my foot and my balance was off.
The first treatment changed everything.
First day, I felt the fog starting to clear. I feel so good now. When can I have the next one? And I'm like, am I supposed to wait? Or am I supposed to just go on? And that's where you guys come in. And my mom said, you are back.
Her husband remembers the moment her mother looked at him.
I looked at her mom, and her mom looked at me and said, we got our girl back.
We got our girl back. Stories like Susan's are why KBlend exists. You can hear Susan's full story right now at KBlend.com. And if you or someone you love is struggling, you don't have to face it alone. Call the KBlend Helpline, 734-605-8500. That's 734-605-8500. The KBlend Helpline is ready for your call.
Welcome to the KBlend Show. Honest conversations about God, mental health, and chronic pain. Without masks, without pretending, and without fake smiles. Here are your hosts, John and Krista Klyder.
Hello, and welcome to the KBlend Show. My name is Dr. Krista Klyder, and I'm your host for today. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We are thrilled that you are listening. And I am joined today by my friend and guest, Jay. Jay, thank you so much for coming today to share your story, your ups and downs of life, your struggles, but your story of hope as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So sometimes the hardest part about depression and anxiety isn't the depression and anxiety itself. It's actually the journey that you've taken to try to seek help. Sometimes in the mental health care field, it's very difficult to find relief from your symptoms. And whether that's your suicidal ideations, whether that's just simply trying to take care of yourself, to get out of bed, to take that shower, to brush your teeth, maybe it's simply going to work and trying to provide for your family. It could be just cooking dinner for your family, your children, and your spouse. And those things can be very difficult when you live under the diagnosis of depression and anxiety. And so I am very thrilled today that we have Jay here, who's going to share again his amazing testimony of his journey through depression and anxiety to find hope. Maybe you've tried counseling. Maybe you have tried all the medications. Maybe you've prayed harder. Maybe you've pushed yourself to do things outside of your comfort zone, but you have found very little improvement. You've sought different doctors, many doctors. You've sought many different medications, and you're still struggling with the patterns and trying to change. And maybe you're struggling to the point where you're wondering, well, what's the point? Why am I here? What am I doing? Am I ever going to find relief? So I'm so thankful that you're listening to the KBlend Show today, because we are going to share with you a tool that you can use in your life that can change that pattern of thinking, that can give you hope, that can give you a future, that will help you to move past those negative thought loops. And if you would like to watch the video session of this radio show, please go to www.mykblend, that's M-Y, the letter K, BLEND.com, mykblend.com, and click on the live stream button, and you can watch the video of the session. So I'm an advanced practice nurse, and in the state of Michigan, I'm duly board certified in anesthesia as a certified registered nurse anesthetist, and also as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And my husband and I, we have been running the KBlend program for over 5 years now. So what does that mean? That means that we've actually treated hundreds of patients, again, with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations, maybe it's post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and all types of chronic pain syndromes. And we are your resource for the next hour. We are going to be sharing some amazing things with you, things that maybe sound like that we have paid actors on our show. But Jay here, he is very much a real and current patient at KBlend, and we are going to be sharing his story. So Jay, you've been a patient with us now since March of 2024. And why don't you share a little bit with the audience about what it was like before you came to the KBlend program?
Yeah, so before KBlend, it was difficult to get out of bed. It was difficult to go to work. It was difficult to think clearly or even use my coping skills because of just the weight that depression can have on your mind and the way that it can change your thought patterns. KBlend is like the puzzle piece that I've been looking for a very long time and finally fit in the right place.
Specifically mentioned anger at God. You specifically mentioned chronic high stress, boundaries, issues with burnout, fatigue. You were isolating, you had low self-esteem, you felt numb to the world. You had some generational trauma. You had some grief that you were dealing with, some guilt, post-traumatic stress disorder. You have a serious medical condition and trauma overall. These are some heavy things that you were dealing with. Explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think to your first point, like the anger at God, that came from some trauma that I went through when I was a kid. I had lost my dad in a car accident. It was very difficult for my young mind at 10 years old to process, why would God do this? Why me? Why him? Why this? And why now? Were a lot of the questions. And not only that, but I think that led to kind of me becoming depressed initially right after this happened, which back then I was isolated. I felt different at school. I felt like my social life had drastically changed. My friends would come up to me and instead of, hey, how are you? It's, I'm so sorry for your loss. And like, sometimes it's really hard to like respond to that, like in the moment. It can be very difficult. And today I still struggle sometimes with anger at God. Like, because now that I have kids, they have a grandma, but not a grandpa, and like it's a difficult conversation when, you have to explain that to your children. So that kind of comes along with, some generational trauma as well, especially after the accident, it became like everything changed. I felt like I needed to step up and kind of fill the void. And, through that, I started to like exhaust myself, started to do poorly in school. There weren't really the tools there at the time to help me being 10 years old. The one tool that I did use at that point in time was therapy, which was great. Great. But at the same time, it still felt like that puzzle piece was missing.
So this accident that happened at 10 years old, you went through this very traumatic event.
Yeah.
And that was when you first started noticing symptoms of depression and anxiety. And you went through counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Was counseling, so you said that it wasn't too beneficial. It was beneficial, but yet at the same time, you felt like that there was still something missing from there.
Right.
So you continued to struggle then for several years. What other things did you try? Did you try to self-medicate using alcohol or drugs? Did you maybe do different medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications? What other things did you try before you came to KBlend?
Yeah, so for KBlend, I was seeing a psychiatrist for many years, multiple different psychiatrists. We also, in the midst of all of this, right after the accident, had a huge life change. We lived in the north at the time, near New York City, and then we moved to the south. And I had to change my therapist, and I had to go through explaining my story all over again. And then them thinking, oh, well, maybe the medications that you're on aren't as effective as they are. So then I basically started this whole 10-year course of getting random medications thrown at me, random antidepressants. Some would work for a month, some would work just slightly, some would give me maybe a piece back of my life. But not until I started coming to KBlend, like, I couldn't laugh. I couldn't smile. The isolation was real. I felt like just needed to be in a shell. And I feel like KBlend and putting that puzzle piece together, like, allowed me to come out of that shell.
Wow, that's amazing. And, in that decade, how do you feel now looking back at that decade? Do you feel maybe some grief that you lost that period in your life? I mean, that must have been pretty traumatizing after the first trauma that you had, just going through all of the different providers, trying to find a solution, and yet still struggling with real symptoms. Those are real things that you were really going through that we know that some of our listeners are also struggling with as well.
So yeah, it was really difficult. Every time you see a new psychiatrist, a new therapist, they do get the records, but like, you still kind of have to explain yourself and kind of explain where you're at. Cause like, your records might show where you were at a point in time. But if you see a therapist for, let's say, 6-7 years, like I did, and then switch therapists, it becomes like almost like reinventing the wheel all over again. It literally is starting from square one. And to your point, I do have grief about the time, in that I struggled as a child and through my adolescence, through high school, and even in college. I have grief for the time that maybe if this, KBlend had been available during that time, like, a lot of things could have been different. My life could have been a little bit easier. It could have been, instead of going to therapy and getting taught these skills and then struggling to apply them because I was so depressed, KBlend gave me the ability to actually use the tools while I was, in a depressive episode or an anxious episode. And that is amazing in itself.
And it's even more amazing that you're willing to talk about it on the radio where hundreds of people are listening. But we know that God puts you in a place where you need to be, when you need to be there. And I know that there's somebody listening right now who is struggling with the same issues that you went through.
Yeah.
So, listeners out there, if you're questioning what is the KBlend program, I want you to give us a call. Our phone number is 734-605-8500. Again, our phone number is 734-605-8500. You can also go to www.mykblend.com. That's the letter KBlend.com to get more information. But please give us a call, okay? We're going to take a few minutes and come back in just a second with more amazing testimonial here from Jay.
7 months ago, I had plans to kill myself about 3 times in that month.
Scott had been dealing with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation for over 50 years. Then he found out about KBlend.
My best buddy got me into KBlend, and I told him, there's no way you can fix me. I'm unfixable. And John and Krista assured me that they can help me.
John and Krista Klyder of KBlend use their proprietary and highly personalized ketamine infusion plan to work like a sledgehammer to break the chains of bondage to anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, PTSD, and other mood disorders. Call the KBlend Helpline at 734-605-8500.
My experience with KBlend, such a loving environment, just fantastic.
KBlend can help you too. Call the KBlend Helpline at 734-605-8500. For years now, you've listened to testimonies from other WMUZ listeners about the miraculous effects of KBlend on
PTSD. I'm bipolar. I have anxiety. I have depression.
I was actually diagnosed bipolar. There was a time I was taking probably 30 to 45 pills a day.
I've been dealing with depression for about 2.5 decades. Depression and anxiety. I've been in and out of hospitals, and that's usually because of a suicide attempt.
But you're still suffering. Don't wait any longer. With this special offer from KBlend, now is the time to contact John and Krista at 734-605-8500.
There were a lot of nights where I would go to sleep and I would just hope that I just didn't get up the next day, to be honest with you.
I've tried pretty much everything that you could think of. I was diagnosed with severe depression, severe anxiety, bipolar disorder. I wasn't able to do daily tasks. I would just lay in bed for days. definitely has not just changed my life, but saved my life.
KBlend acts like a sledgehammer on treatment-resistant mood disorders like suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, and on chronic pain.
I started noticing a difference even just after the first treatment. After the third treatment, it was a very, very big difference.
Break the chains of your mood disorder or chronic pain and get real and lasting relief with KBlend. Get on the road to real recovery by calling the Helpline at 734-605-8500.
Welcome back to the KBlend Show. I'm Dr. Krista Klyder, and I'm your host for today. And we are talking about depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder with a real patient, a current patient in the KBlend program. Jay, thank you so much for joining us today again.
Course.
And we've been hearing some amazing testimonial from you about what your life has been like before the KBlend program. Explain a little bit more about how that accident affected you.
The accident itself, a lot of, I can't speak for everybody, but most people with PTSD, I at least feel like re-experience their trauma at some point. And for me, that happened to manifest in nightmares. It was almost every night that I went to sleep, the entire thing happened all over again. So while trying to heal, while trying to cope, while trying to use these skills, every night that I went to sleep, I still had that same reminder of like the trauma that I went through. So like you wake up the next morning and your mindset is like completely back to like where it was before you even, tried to like address the problem or use your coping skills. And it kind of puts you back even more. And then you go to therapy, you talk about it, you try to use your skills again. And it just became this like repetitive cycle that I couldn't break.
A repetitive loop in your brain that kept playing over and over and over again, right? No matter how hard you tried to get out of that rut, so to speak.
Yeah.
You felt like that you were still getting covered with mud inside of that rut.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So PTSD, it can affect everything from our thought patterns, but also our physical body. Did your PTSD affect you physically as well? And whether it's from high blood pressure, whether it's from acid reflux, heartburn, irritable bowel syndrome, have you noticed other physical manifestations from your PTSD?
Yeah, all of it, to be completely honest. And the physical manifestations often puts me in this fight or flight, like constant state where it's like, it's constant. There's no break from it. There's no relief, and that's where like KBlend comes in as a tool. And like the analogy I used before, it's putting that puzzle piece into place that like just completes, you as a person. And I can't understate the impact that it has on my life.
So through the process of going through PTSD and living with those symptoms day after day after day, right? Your body and your brain are trying to run away or try to fight, as you express that, being in that state of fight or flight. So what physically happens to our bodies is that our bodies trigger our sympathetic nervous system, and that's your fight or flight. That's your get up and go, right? Get ready. And so our brains actually can't handle that high stimulation day in and day out. And what happens is that we know based on medical literature, we know that based on brain scans from big institutions across the country and outside of our borders, that our brains do shut down different areas of itself to protect itself. It's like a self-preservation mechanism, right?
Yeah.
That all of a sudden we become only consumed with eating, sleeping, going to the bathroom, and surviving. That's it. And much the same way that if you were stuck in the woods and, you're walking through the woods, you're lost, you don't know where you're going, your fight or flight is already up. You're nervous. You have no idea what direction home is in. There's no help on the way. But then all of a sudden you see a bear. And so you start to run away from that bear. Your body is going to naturally shunt blood from your gut to your heart and your lungs so that way you can run away from that bear. But when you talk about mental health, what people don't realize is that the brain is so crazy powerful that it does the same type of thing that the rest of our body does in that state. And so it does naturally shut down different areas of itself. The KBlend program, crazy enough, as you've experienced, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of people I know that are listening might say, oh, again, I don't know where they're making this stuff up at. They shouldn't be sharing this information. It's not true, but it is very much true. Again, based on medical literature and science, we have developed our program, and the KBlend program can actually restore those communication pathways to pull you out of that fight or flight mode. It actually gives you the ability to think with all of your brain, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so we know that the prefrontal cortex, which I know that that's a big term out there that people talk about because it's so important in our executive level thinking. So our ability to make decisions, to prioritize, to think through situations, to not overreact, that's one of the first areas that shuts down in our brain. So
Mhm.
what happens is that all of a sudden in depression, anxiety, PTSD, when we're in these states of high fight or flight mode, that we find ourselves unable to get through a difficult conversation with our spouses without overreacting. We find ourselves self-medicating and reaching for the bottle or reaching for a bottle of pills or going to the street to find some type of relief from our pain, right? We find ourselves maybe going from doctor to doctor because we can't get relief. We don't know what to do, right? We become like caged animals, so to speak. Did you experience that, all of those symptoms when you were in your PTSD at the highest point?
Yeah, it felt like a cage that, was almost near impossible to get out of, and it affected my life in many ways. Like, in middle school, I had difficulty with like socialization and it's PTSD like spreads throughout like the way that you approach things, and in many different ways. It manifests in you could be driving down the road and like see maybe the same car that, you're instantly like put back into that mind frame of like, oh my God, this happened. And then that triggers the fight or flight response, which then like makes it harder for you to cope and harder for you to like talk yourself off the ledge per se.
And did you feel like you ever reached a point where you started wondering, is the pain ever going to stop?
Yes.
Like, what is the point? Why am I here? Why did I have to go through this? Like you talked at first in the first segment about your anger with God. Did
Mhm.
you feel like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? It's never going to get better. I just basically want to die.
Yeah, I think I felt that way. I didn't have as much suicidal ideation in my specific case, but it came to the point where it's like, what kind of quality of life am I living right now? And like it was, trying different supplements or like things that I could find online that like potentially could benefit me. I became so desperate that like I went and saw a naturopath and like I started taking like different vitamins to try to see if that would help, and it just felt like every time I tried to kind of take, care of myself, that it was just I faced the wall, whether that be like a psychiatrist that's hesitant to try a specific medication, or maybe you have a therapist that you went to and you had a bad experience and you start from scratch again, like we talked about earlier in the segment, all over again. So it definitely does feel like a cage. It feels like you're stuck.
Absolutely. And when you were going through this process of going to see multiple providers, did you ever feel that they were, and maybe they came out and just told you that you were treatment resistant?
Yes, it took them quite a while to say this. To be completely honest, they really wanted to kind of push the medications. My last psychiatrist prior to coming to KBlend and where I used to live made the recommendation, and she said, I think you really have treatment resistant depression at this point, and said that you've tried almost everything that we could possibly offer you, and that leaves you feeling like even more defeated. That's like basically saying we're out of options, and you go into an even deeper depression, and you get, a feeling of like, when will this end? When will I get like just one single day or one single hour or 30 minutes of relief,
Did you feel like that was similar to somebody with cancer being given like the terminal diagnosis?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, pretty much. It's because like at that point you're out of options. There's nothing, you can do. So like you just continue doing therapy. You just continue like, trying your best to like work through coping skills. But what's difficult, and like what we talked about before, is just the fact that like when you're in that deep of a depression or an anxious state or even a post-traumatic stress disorder episode, those coping skills might do nothing, completely nothing. They may make you feel slightly better, but where KBlend comes in is it actually sharpens that tool. Like it allows the ability for you to sit there and think and cope and process without triggering that fight or flight response. And that's how, like, over the years that I've been here, I've just continuously gotten better session after session.
Absolutely. And, a lot of patients describe their feelings as being numb before coming to KBlend, that they have a hard time relating to, say, a sad movie.
Yeah.
Being sad, going to a birthday party and being happy and being able to relate to the people that are around them. Did you experience any numbness in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's also kind of really hard too, because sometimes that numbness shows up in like wonderful moments, like, I don't know, maybe a graduation or, maybe a proud moment of yourself where you feel like you should be extremely happy, proud of yourself, accomplished. And that numbness from, the array of like mental disorders just takes the pride and joy out of that moment. And, to have that back, I can't even understate. Like, it almost has me tearing up here just talking about it.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the KBlend show. We're going to have more in just a few minutes, but I want you to give us a call if you can relate to anything that Jay has shared. Maybe you or someone you know is struggling right now, and we are your resource. We're here to help you. We're here to explain more about what the KBlend program is and how it might be able to help you or your loved one. Our phone number is 734-605-8500. Again, our phone number is 734-605-8500. You can also visit us at www.mykblend.com. We'll see you back in just a second.
This is Nate talking about his KBlend success on the Home and Health Show.
3 weeks ago, I would have been sitting here, I'd have been fidgety and not been able to speak clearly. Now I feel like I could face the world. The fears are gone, like the chains are broke.
Nate had tried just about everything to get his depression and anxiety under control, but the medications and therapy weren't working. Then he tried KBlend. Proprietary KBlend acts like a sledgehammer on treatment-resistant mood disorders like anxiety, depression, PTSD, OCD, even chronic pain.
If you tried everything else, why not try this? You went down that path before, why not go down this one?
Call the KBlend helpline at 734-605-8500 and talk with the KBlend experts about how this miraculous treatment can break the chains of your mood disorder or chronic pain.
If there's a light at the end of the tunnel for me, I know there's a light at the tunnel for others.
Call 734-605-8500. Call the KBlend helpline at 734-605-8500 and talk with the KBlend experts. For years now, you've listened to testimonies from other WMUZ listeners about the miraculous effects of KBlend on
PTSD. I'm bipolar. I have anxiety. I have depression.
I was actually diagnosed bipolar. There was a time I was taking probably 30 to 45 pills a day.
I've been dealing with depression for about 2.5 decades. Depression and anxiety. I've been in and out of hospitals, and that's usually because of a suicide attempt.
But you're still suffering. Don't wait any longer. With this special offer from KBlend, now is the time to contact John and Krista at 734-605-8500.
There were a lot of nights where I would go to sleep and I would just hope that I just didn't get up the next day, to be honest with you.
I've tried pretty much everything that you could think of. I was diagnosed with severe depression, severe anxiety, bipolar disorder, I wasn't able to do daily tasks. I would just lay in bed for days. Definitely has not just changed my life, but saved my life.
KBlend acts like a sledgehammer on treatment-resistant mood disorders like suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, and on chronic pain.
I started noticing a difference even just after the first treatment. After the third treatment, it was a very, very big difference.
Break the chains of your mood disorder or chronic pain and get real and lasting relief with KBlend. Get on the road to real recovery by calling the Helpline at 734-605-8500.
Welcome back to the KBlend Show. I'm Dr. Krista Klyder, your host for today, and we are hearing some amazing testimonial from Jay. Jay, you have been through so much in your life. As young as 10 years old, you went through this very traumatic accident that basically triggered PTSD in your life. From there, spiraling depression, spiraling anxiety, isolation, a difficult time through school, all very traumatic childhood growing up. Also, in your college years, your young adulthood, you were struggling because then you had to go to multiple providers who tried many different medications with you, tried different forms of therapy, still struggling with overwhelming symptoms of PTSD, depression, and anxiety, finding not too much relief at all. And then you were walloped with the diagnosis of treatment-resistant, that you had treatment-resistant depression, that you were basically, there's nothing more that we can do for you. That was the overwhelming feeling that you got from your providers. And, you know, before the show, we ask our current patients to share with us some of the areas of their life that they were struggling with. And on this form, I'm just going to read this to you, Jay. You marked everything from grief, guilt, low self-esteem, numbness. You marked isolation. You marked anger with God. You marked boundaries, burnout, chronic high stress. You marked fatigue. You marked trauma, of course. You marked serious medical conditions. Now, you're in a very different spot today than you were when you first came to the KBlend program. How does it make you feel listening to me highlight the areas that you were really struggling with? How does that make you feel reflecting back on that?
It makes me sad knowing that like I didn't know about KBlend sooner. You know, when you're issued like a diagnosis of treatment-resistant depression, it's automatic. Like it feels like isolation. You are basically being told again, like, oh, there's nothing else we can do for you. And like you go to doctors for answers, right? You know, you go to doctors to feel better, to work on yourself. But like when you're given that, like you're treatment resistant, it almost as if it just like puts a even heavier weight on your shoulders to like, okay, well, now what are my next steps? And like, mind you, you're doing that while you're already depressed, while you're already not able to get out of bed, while you're already like having difficulties going to work, going to school, whatever it may be. It also makes you feel like you're this kind of, you know, special person that like medications don't work for. And like, you know, I don't necessarily know that's the truth after KBlend.
And when you were going through this time in your life where you were labeled with treatment-resistant depression, you were struggling to, like you said, do daily activities, right? Just to maintain what you needed to keep yourself healthy, to provide for yourself. Were you married with your wife at that time?
Yes. Yes, I was.
How did that diagnosis affect your marriage?
So I would say that in the beginning, like we both had depression to a certain extent. So like we both kind of understood each other, but it got difficult after the treatment resistant depression diagnosis because of the fact that like, again, it's like we're out of options, you know? So where do I go? What do I do? And like it ended up in endless Google searches that would have never told me anything about a program like KBlend. All of the answers that I got from people that I trust, people psychiatrists, psychologists, psych evaluations, all of those things, they put you in this, it makes it hard because you kind of shut down. You kind of maybe not laugh as much as you did with your spouse. You maybe don't have enough energy to go do fun things or to get out, in public. It becomes hard. Especially when self-care suffers, and you're not necessarily taking care of yourself, you're not eating, that has its own effects on the body, which actually makes your, condition worse, not eating, not drinking water, not taking care of yourself, not taking a shower. All of those things just bubble up, and it makes it harder to do the things that you need to do to get better. Going out is a positive thing when you have depression, and getting out and taking, your shower, or, taking care of yourself, going to get, a haircut, whatever it might be. When you have depression, it's almost like the effort that it takes is multiplied by a factor of however deep your depression is at that point in time. If you're in a state where you're barely taking care of yourself, going out feels like the most daunting task in the world. And then to top that off, in the family matter, you have to do things like go to the grocery store. You have to do things like, errands, going to the doctor. And even going to the doctor, it becomes hard because at that point, you're going to get seen for treatment-resistant depression. And they're telling you there's nothing they can do. So every appointment, it's the same refill, the same medication, and literally just you're stuck.
Wow. And as you're going through this process and your wife is there by your side trying to support you through it all, that must have been really, really hard.
Yeah.
You must have felt like that you were basically, and I say this a lot because this is how oftentimes my patients feel, that you're on an island all by yourself.
Yeah.
That you feel like that there's nobody coming to rescue you. You have very little resources. You're stuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you heard about the KBlend program, I know that I remember the first time that you and I met.
Yep.
And I remember, the frustration level was there.
Yep.
That as many of my patients are, I've been through all these things and very, very few things have helped me. I've seen very few results, treatment resistant, overwhelming sense of sadness, right? And hopelessness.
Right.
When you came to KBlend, what was your first impression when you first met me?
Before even our first session, just in our consultation, I felt an immediate sense of relief. I feel like you actually listened to what I was trying to communicate as being my top problems. I was a bit of an atypical patient to kind of transfer appointment. I immediately got a sense of hope, and I was super excited for my first infusion just to see what the outcomes were going to be. And I had, really high hopes that were exceeded.
Amazing. And you're going to hear more about the KBlend program here in just a few minutes from Jay and the amazing transformational results that you have had with our program. Yeah. And again, we are so thankful that you're here today to share your testimony, because I know sharing about these things that are so personal about your trauma, about your depression and anxiety, about your marriage, how those affected your marriage, how that you were labeled with treatment-resistant depression. It's not easy to talk about, especially to hundreds of people that are out there listening right now, right? Airing your dirty laundry, so to speak, right? But we are so thankful that you're listening to us. Again, this is the KBlend Show, and we are your resource for mental health, mood disorders, and chronic pain. So please listen to us on our last segment here coming up today, and give us a call at 734-605-8500. Again, our phone number is 734-605-8500. You can also visit us at www.mykblend, that's the letter K, BLEND.com. More to come about Jay's amazing testimonial.
Depression and trauma can leave people feeling trapped, like the fog will never lift.
I was wrestling with depression and anxiety, some trauma that happened to me in my home.
After suffering strokes, Susan struggled with balance.
I had a very difficult time processing. I really needed help. After I had the strokes, I would drag my foot and my balance was off.
The first treatment changed everything.
First day, I felt the fog starting to clear. I feel so good now. When can I have the next one? And I'm like, am I supposed to wait? Or am I supposed to just go on? And that's where you guys come in. And my mom said, you are back.
Her husband remembers the moment her mother looked at him.
I looked at her mom, and her mom looked at me and said, we got our girl back.
We got our girl back. Stories like Susan's are why KBlend exists. You can hear Susan's full story right now at KBlend.com. And if you or someone you love is struggling, you don't have to face it alone. Call the KBlend Helpline, 734-605-8500. That's 734-605-8500. The KBlend Helpline is ready for your call.
Welcome back to the KBlend Show. I'm Dr. Krista Klyder, and we have been talking with Jay, a current patient in the KBlend program, about his depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have been hearing some amazing testimonial from you, Jay. If you had to sum up how you were feeling at that point before you walked through the KBlend clinic doors, how would you describe that?
I felt lost and almost alone. Like I felt like there wasn't really anybody out there that could share the same experience. It's hard when you have depression and I have 2 kids, and it's hard when your depression limits your ability to enjoy life, enjoy your kids, enjoy the time. Like sometimes you just feel like the weight is so heavy that, maybe you're laying on the couch, maybe you're laying in bed, whatever it might be for you. It's one of those things that, like, looking back now, it makes me sad for myself, that like before KBlend, that like these things were happening, and like it's kind of this like weird like pattern. Like it's not like you don't want to get up and play with your kids or anything like that. It's actually the depression like limiting your ability to do that, whether it's you're too tired or like the weight is just so heavy that it's hard to like, almost pretend to be happy. And that weight is like super heavy. As I got into the KBlend program, these things like started to like go away slowly but surely. Like, the first session that I had, I woke up the next morning and I had such a clear mind. I was on the floor. I was playing with my kids. I was happy. I smiled. I laughed. My wife and I, we like to joke around with each other. And like, usually when I get into these depressive states, that doesn't happen. Like I don't have that like function or ability or like the happiness to like even cut a joke. And like to be able to do that again and like reconnect on that level because of like the barriers being eliminated, or at least like reduced to the point that I can cope and handle things, has like essentially given me the life that I want back, the life that I want to live, the time that I want to spend, the things that I want to do.
The life that you want to live. Those are very powerful words that just hit me really hard. The life that you want to live.
Yeah.
But what other little things have you noticed in your life? Are you still finding days where you're having to stay in bed because of your depression?
No, not at all. In fact, it like has given me the ability to like have more difficult discussions, stand up for myself in areas that I wouldn't have before because I would have kind of just like anxiously retreated. That power alone is like I said, it's getting your life back. I can live a life now with a lot less weight and a lot more of a ability to like cope and get around problems through the KBlend program. Whereas before it was just like, I'm in that cage again, and you're stuck.
So safe to say that you have increased self-confidence.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. And that you're able to face the giants head on, so to speak, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And face them on with a completely like different mindset. Like I'm able to like have the other person's perspective in the back of my mind. I'm able to hear people out, even though I disagree with them, or maybe that is a dagger coming at me. And like I have to like kind of respond. And like it's led to me like fixing problems of like burnout and fatigue and frustration in different areas of my life that I wouldn't have previously thought before.
That's amazing. And, that's part prefrontal cortex is functioning, right? And
Right.
then the other part is that you're actually listening and following through. So, for example, you see that bear in the woods,
Yep.
the giant in your life, whether it's again, maybe it's something at work that's going on, right? And you
Mhm.
are able to think through the situation. Do I need to run? Do I need to fight? Or can I work my way through this problem and negotiate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And with clarity, like extreme clarity. And
Okay.
that's like the huge difference is like before, like with depression without KBlend. Like, so let's say I'm facing these same problems, depression puts on like this shutter or like this filter in your brain that like you always go to the negative, always, more pessimistic ways, and like allowed me to go to be the optimistic person that I was before all of the trauma happened.
Absolutely. And as you go through the day to day life, your nervous system is feeling more stabilized. You're not
Absolutely.
reliving, or are you reliving those negative thought loops about the trauma? Explain that a little bit more.
There are times that like I get into the negative thought loops, but what the difference is that the coping tools that I have actually work because I have that shutter removed. That way, like I actually get through the problem and like you said, just figure out the approach that I need to take. And it completely changes like social relationships, working relationships, interactions with people in general. And it's just made me a happier person. I've done more good for other people. I like to help other people. And I was that way that before. But I feel like now it's like I have even more the energy to invest.
hmm And I can feel that energy coming through you
Yeah.
today as you're sharing because this is really hard to do.
Right.
This is really hard to do sitting here and knowing that there's hundreds of people listening, potentially more,
Right.
right? Because we are also live streaming this on our website. You can go to www.mykblend.com. That's the letter KBlend.com. And you can click on the live stream button and see the video of this session. And so, we don't know how many people are listening, but I guarantee you that somebody out there is going through or has been through exactly what you're ups and the downs a little bit.
Mm.
It is overwhelming when you've been through the mental health care system and you're finding that very few things work, that you're labeled with that quote terminal diagnosis
Right.
of treatment resistant depression, right?
Mhm.
Um, what would you say to somebody listening right now who has been listening for the last hour and they are just probably angry with us that we're sharing this because they just feel so hopeless that they're like, nothing is going to work for me. They must have paid this guy a lot of money to come here today and sit
Yeah.
here to, make all these things up and to say all these things. But that is not true. 110% not true.
Absolutely.
You are a real person who
Yep.
has had real struggles and you have found real hope with the KBlend program. So, what would you say to that person today that's listening and maybe a little angry with what they're hearing right now?
Yeah. I would say don't make the same mistake that I did. Don't go years and years and years trying to find your solution when there might be one right here. You don't want to have that grief of the life that you could have had. Whereas compared to like my previous statement, the life that I want and the life that I've always wanted, take the step. It might be scary to start a new treatment, but I really think that like the people out there and especially that have gone through things, similar to me or even a tangent to what I've been on, I think that it's definitely worth to come and to KBlend and to try to see will this work for me? Because, I was skeptical in the beginning about, the whole thing. That changes the minute you speak to Krista. the minute you speak to John, and you get hope back. And they're here to see you success, to see your success, and they'll do anything to make sure that you feel comfortable, you feel safe, you feel like you're getting progress, and like very, very hard to find.
You know that it's not easy to be labeled all of those things and then put your faith into something else, right? Something that
Right.
maybe you've never heard of, or maybe you only know a little about, and take that step of faith and come through our doors. And so thank you for sharing those kind words
Yeah.
about my husband and I, John. So it can be really, really hard living with all of those symptoms, all those diagnoses, all of those labels. Do you still find yourself thinking about yourself as treatment resistant depression now?
No.
Do you still feel that weight of that diagnosis on your shoulders?
No, I don't feel the weight on my shoulders anymore. And I still take medication to this day. And, whereas if I didn't have KBlend and I was just taking the antidepressant or whatever medication I was given, I would be stuck in the same situation I was 10 years ago.
And so how do you feel that you are now? Do you feel that you have hope in a future?
Yes, I have hope in a future. And like, I feel like now that, I'm living and I'm addressing boundaries that I've never addressed before and having these difficult conversations I would have never put myself into that are having like great impacts on my life, like big changes just by having the one uncomfortable discussion. And like, that's the power of KBlend, is like it allows you to get in that mindset to like think clearly, to have these discussions. Okay, is it worth it? Is it worth to have this topic discussed? Or is it maybe I know I'm feeling depressed, and maybe is it calling Krista and just saying, "Hey, I feel depressed. Like I think I might need an infusion, or what do you potentially recommend here?" And they will definitely guide you in the right direction, as they did me.
It's amazing what happens when your prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders,
It
right?
is. It's like, it feels like shutters are removed, like the blindness from, the depression, and like just thinking in a pessimistic way, and switching that to be an optimist, is huge. It's huge. Can't even understate the impact that it's had on me in my life. And I wouldn't know what to do without you guys.
Aw. Well, praise God that you found our clinic and
Yes.
that you have been through the KBlend program, that you're seeing these amazing results like so many other
Absolutely.
patients also have. Now, I find it really interesting, Jay, that I just asked you to describe how you're feeling in this moment, having been through these horrible traumas in your life. I'm really confused here. I'm not sure how you could go from being so angry towards God to now you're feeling this peace. I mean, that's a huge transformation that you just shared with the audience. I'm not sure if the listeners picked up on that or not, but I mean, I'm not sure where to take this. Can
Yeah.
you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, KBlend has given me the ability to process the reasons that I was angry at God, right? A lot of the reasons were, like you said, why me? Why this? Why now? Why did this happen? And like, no, it doesn't necessarily give my father back or anything like that. But it allows me to, realize the distinction of God didn't necessarily pick me for punishment directly. He didn't really say, I'm going to make Jay's life terrible. That never happened. But in my head, it was real. I was very angry. I was very upset. And I think through KBlend, I was able to, again, process these things in a way that, like, opening back up, I think it shifted my perspective of things a lot. I think that it made me realize this isn't directed towards me. These are just part of life. Being able to process those traumas made me realize that, again, he didn't do these things to me on purpose. He didn't single me out. It's starting to make me come back to the realization that God is there for us. I feel the presence of God more than I did now than I did back then. I feel like I can feel the presence of him in my life, whereas before it was like, why even try? Why did you do this to me? I'm angry. I don't want to talk to you. But now I find myself like actually like starting to pray again and to like get back the relationship I want with God. That in itself is like just an extremely powerful thing, because I also want my children and my wife to know God. And like, it's hard when you have, you know, one person who's been through a lot of trauma and has a lot of anger towards God, go to church as a family or to even entertain some of the topics, you know? So yeah, I think it KBlend really helped me get back to the point where I didn't feel like it was a targeted quote unquote war. It was just life and things happening as they were meant to happen. And KBlend gave me the processing power back to get through those challenges and get my relationship back.
I don't know what to say. That was really powerful. Like, I'm very, very humbled because what you just described, and I'm probably going to get emotional right now,
Mhm.
because what you just described is completely life transformational.
It is.
And to think that I have had the honor of impacting your life the way that you just described. You know, I didn't understand why I got called away from my career, why God called me, literally pretty much pulled the rug out from underneath of me, is what I'm trying to say, in my career, and said, you need to shift your focus, that this is what I have in store for you. And I didn't understand it at the time, 5 years ago when we opened the KBlend clinic, and struggled with it. You know, I couldn't understand where this was going to lead my husband and I. And yet time and time again, through my awesome patient testimonials, and again, for our listeners here, this is not a scripted radio show here. We are literally, you know, sitting here in the studio and just trying to see what your life was like before, during, and after the KBlend program. And, you know, yet time and time again, going back to my point, is that I get affirmations that I'm exactly where I need to be. And so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for sharing that, because it confirms inside of me that I'm doing what God has called me to do. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Life transforming, the KBlend program. You know, we started this program based on medical literature, based on a calling that God gave me to my life, not sure of exactly what I was doing with it and where I was going. And fast forward to 5 years later, over 5 years later, I have Jay sitting with us today in our studio and sharing his amazing testimonial from very, very traumatic childhood, accident, diagnoses, treatment-resistant depression, feeling hopeless, feeling like basically there was nothing that could ever help him. And yet here we are today talking about how a program that God called me to start has transformed your life in so many different ways. Improved your marriage, improved your relationship with your children, improved your boundaries and your work performance, has improved your ability just to function on a daily basis. So I'm going to give you a high five because I am just overwhelmed with emotion right now myself, hearing your testimonial. And I hope that our listeners are too. It's amazing.
I know. I kind of want to cry too.
Depression and trauma can leave people feeling trapped, like the fog will never lift.
I was wrestling with depression and anxiety, some trauma that happened to me in my home.
After suffering strokes, Susan struggled with balance.
I had a very difficult time processing. I really needed help. After I had the strokes, I would drag my foot and my balance was off.
The first treatment changed everything.
First day, I felt the fog starting to clear. I feel so good now. When can I have the next one? And I'm like, am I supposed to wait? Or am I supposed to just go on? And that's where you guys come in. And my mom said, you are back.
Her husband remembers the moment her mother looked at him.
I looked at her mom, and her mom looked at me and said, we got our girl back.
We got our girl back. Stories like Susan's are why KBlend exists. You can hear Susan's full story right now at KBlend.com. And if you or someone you love is struggling, you don't have to face it alone. Call the KBlend Helpline, 734-605-8500. That's 734-605-8500. The KBlend Helpline is ready for your call.
You've been listening to The KBlend Show with your hosts, John and Krista Klyder. Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about this revolutionary treatment at mykblend.com, or you can speak directly to a KBlend expert by calling 734-605-8500. And join us each Saturday afternoon at 1 for more honest stories of healing and hope with The KBlend Show on 103.5 FM WMUZ The Light, Detroit, Maine, Bible Strong.